Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another day in palette week. I am interrupting palette week still with a palette video, but this is the first time I am doing a video like this. I recently received the new Alter Ego Amberglow eyeshadow palette, and this is launching tomorrow, and I thought it would be fun to compare it to the palette that it was inspired by, which is the Natasha Denona Golden palette. This is my current favorite, I think, Natasha palette. I recently No Pan Left Behind at the Natasha Golden, so I am super familiar and feel very up to date with the Natasha Denona Golden palette. So I thought it would be fun to do some swatch comparisons today, and then I do create the look that I have on my eyes today with the new Amberglow palette. So if you're interested in seeing how close these two are, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like palette themed content or just hanging out and chit-chatting about makeup, we're currently in the middle of palette week, which means every single day for 7 straight days, I am posting some sort of palette themed content. And so I hope you'll consider subscribing if you have not already. Also, don't forget to like this video and leave a comment down below. If you like comparison videos like this, let me know. But other than that, let's get into the video. Okay, you guys, I want to start out by saying it's gonna be 90 degrees today and tomorrow, so I held off on self-tanning because I was gonna see what actual color I can get from real rays of sun this weekend, but I still went for it with my bronzer today. So if I'm looking a little bit like orangey and clowny, just, you know, I'm good with it. I hope you are too. Okay, let's talk about the Alter Ego Amberglow eyeshadow palette. This palette is launching tomorrow, June 26th at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm in Central Time, so 12 my time, and it will be retailing for $24. I do have a code with Alter Ego that will shave you. I hope it doesn't shave. Well, it shaves money, I guess, off your total. It will save you 10%, which brings the palette cost down to $21.60. Now, I do earn a commission off that, so if that makes you uncomfortable, I completely understand. Just throwing it out there. There's a code. There's many codes. You can use someone else's code. Just save yourself some money. Shave it off. And Alter Ego is a brand known for basically duping or doing palettes that are inspired by other palettes. So this one was inspired by the Natasha Denona Golden palette. Here are the two palettes side by side. And I will say, in the past, I haven't always kept every single palette that Alter Ego has sent me. However, the last several I have, because I'm a neutral girly at heart, especially lately. I've been liking a more neutral color story, and I think Alter Ego has excellent quality. Their palettes have a bit of weight to them. These shadows are now magnetic again. They've been magnetic. The last several palettes they've launched have been magnetic. There's a mirror. Excellent quality at such an affordable cost. And so when they sent the teaser email about this palette, I was so excited because I had literally just finished No Pan Left Behinding my golden palette, which, if you don't know what that means, it means that I used every single pan of eyeshadow in this palette before I considered it complete. So we're gonna jump into swatch comparisons. I will swatch each shade in this palette against the shade that I believe it is duping in the golden palette, and then we will end the video with this look. Okay, starting with the shade Glint up here, we have this really beautiful, I don't know if you would necessarily call this like an iridescent, but it almost has like this white yellow base. And I don't necessarily know that it's like a duochrome, but it definitely has a really pretty shift to it. It's almost like a white base with like a gold or yellow gold, not even glitter necessarily running throughout. It's more sheeny. And I believe this to be duping the shade Aura from the Golden palette. So there is Aura swatched right next to it. And obviously those two are quite similar, as we hope most of these will be. I would almost say that the shade Aura from Natasha Denona has less of a base than the shade Glint from Amberglow, but again, they are very, very similar. Okay, moving on to Sundrop, we have a matte, like cream to powder shade, which is not always my favorite. I will say this feels very putty-like, more so than others that I've felt, I feel like, from both Natasha Denona and Alter Ego. Okay, and this I'm swatching against, I don't know if you can see, the shade Panna from the Golden palette. Actually, those do feel quite similar in texture. There's Panna. And again, they're very, very similar. I'm trying to decipher. I almost feel like the shade Sundrop from Amberglow is almost a little bit peachier or has a little bit more golden yellowish to it, whereas this is maybe a little bit slightly more peachy pink. There are those two next to one another. Okay, next up we have the shade Rich, which I believe, this is where I'm like, some of them, I'm not quite certain. Like, is Nubia supposed to be Rich or is Nubia supposed to be Ivory? I think Ivory's Alchemist. So I'm gonna swatch Rich, and Rich is such a beautiful golden sparkly shade. Like, that is so pretty. Do I need to zoom you guys in a little bit more, possibly? There's Rich, and then we're swatching that against Nubia. Nubia is one of my favorite shadows in the Golden palette as well. And I do believe that those are the dupes for one another because they do look quite similar. I feel like the Natasha Denona one maybe has a little bit more of like a, I don't know, would you say like a champagne pinky base, whereas this is maybe a little bit slightly more like golden peach, which would be the same as kind of what I said about the matte shadows. So those are those two swatch. Again, I don't believe you would be able to tell a difference on the eyes. And look how pretty and sparkly those are. Next up we have this shade Umber, which I believe is going to be the dupe for Aria right here. So there is the Amberglow shade. And there we have Aria. I did not pick up a lot of Aria. That was a horrible swatch. Okay, there's Aria. I feel like perhaps the shadow from the Amberglow was just more pigmented off of the bat than Aria was. I feel like the way that I swatched Aria maybe makes them look not quite the same, but I honestly feel like these are pretty much spot on dupes for one another. Okay, moving on to the shade Sepia. I believe Sepia is the dupe for the shade Teak here. So here is Sepia from the Amberglow palette, and then here is Teak from the Golden palette. And those pretty much spot on dupes again. I almost feel like the shade from the Amberglow palette is just like a hair more neutral, but I mean, those are very, very similar. Then we are gonna have the shade Bisque, which is the dupe for the shade Mliko. M-L-I-K-O. And this is another one of those cream to powder mattes. So there is the shade from Amberglow, and then there is the shade from the Natasha Denona. Natasha Denona definitely more pigmented off the bat. I will say the shades from the Amberglow just feel almost more putty-like than the ones from the Natasha Denona. I also feel like this one is, again, maybe a little bit more neutral. I don't know, more pink tone. I really don't know. They're very, very close. Again, on the eyes, you would not be able to tell a difference. All right, then we have Velvet, which is the dupe to the shade Fresh. So here we have Velvet from Amberglow and Flesh from the Natasha Denona. Again, very, very similar. I almost feel like the shade from the Natasha Denona has a little bit more yellow to it, whereas I feel like the shade from Amberglow maybe has slightly more like neutral tones or pink peach leaning tones, but again, very, very similar. Okay, then we have Honey, which I believe is going to be the dupe for Aurum. Okay, Aurum to the touch definitely feels a little bit more thick and chunky than the Amberglow shadow. So there's definitely like a texture difference between the two. but again, very, very similar. I do feel like, again, the one from Amberglow is slightly more neutral, whereas the shadow from the Natasha Denona is just slightly more warm and golden in tone, but very similar. Honestly though, I feel like these ones might have the biggest difference of all the ones we've swatched thus far. Okay, moving on to the shade Dazzle. I'm like, is Dazzle Kava or is it Fizzy? Now I'm really confused. Alchemist is Halo. Okay, I'm gonna believe Dazzle is supposed to be Kava and Ivory is supposed to be Fizzy. So we are gonna do Dazzle here. All right, there is Dazzle from the Amberglow. Giving that a little bit more. And then we have Kava from the Natasha Denona. Okay, what I will say about this is I feel like the Natasha Denona in this one feels a little bit more luxe and a little bit more piecey and just a little bit more like sparkly. Whereas this one, I don't feel like the sparkles come across as like lid toppery and piecey. This one almost has a thicker base, whereas this one is just a little bit more sparkly. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. If I had to pick one here, it would be the Natasha shade just because I feel like it's just a little bit more sparkly. All right, then we have Copper and Various. We have Copper and Various. Interesting. Those, I would say, again, I really don't know that you'll be able to tell a difference on the eyes, but the one from Natasha Denona is definitely almost a little bit more of like a dirty bronze, whereas this is, I don't want to say like more of a warm tone bronze, but maybe a little bit more neutral and just a little bit lighter. And again, as they kind of settle, I'm like, you can't notice a huge difference, but they are definitely not exact. Then we have Ivory and Fizzy. All right, we have Ivory. Okay, that is a beautiful shade. And then I'm like, okay, is Ivory supposed to be this one? Because this one definitely has the sparkle like that, but I don't know. There are those two swatched against one another. Both very sparkly. This one I feel like is almost a little bit deeper and has like a little bit more peachiness, whereas this one has maybe a little bit less of a base and is a little bit more champagne in tone. But again, I guess right there they look, I don't want to say very different, but like you can definitely tell the one from Natasha Denona is slightly darker. Next up we have Suede and Sandstone. So we have Suede from the Amberglow, Sandstone from Natasha. Those are horrible swatches, but I feel like they blend in quite nicely together. Those seem like pretty spot on dupes. This one maybe has like a little bit more yellow to it, but they are very, very close. Okay, then we have Halo, which I believe is Alchemist. I believe. I will again say that the Natasha Denona Alchemist definitely has a little bit more texture to it, or just feels slightly more thick and chunky, which sounds bad, but I don't mean it as bad. So there are those two swatched. Again, Natasha Denona a little bit more yellow to it, whereas the Amberglow has a little bit more peachiness to it. Alchemist from the Natasha Denona Golden is like one of my favorites, but I also think that this is really beautiful. This one almost, I don't want to say has less of a base, but I think it's because this one's slightly thicker. It just comes across almost more opaque and pigmented. All right, then we have Blaze and Oro. So Blaze from Amberglow and Oro from Natasha Denona. Again, this one, the Natasha Denona, has a bit more of an opaque base, a little bit more yellow gold, or it could just be because this one, the base is not as heavy. This one just comes across more pigmented. I'm gonna see if I can build Blaze up slightly, yes. But still, this one just has more of an opaque base. And then finally, we have Cocoa and Log. So we have Cocoa from Amberglow. That's a horrible swatch. And then we have Log. Also, dang, a horrible swatch. Dang, that is a horrible swatch from Natasha Denona. Wow. Trying again, there's a little bit. Okay, that one is just really not swatching well at all. But both are dark browns. I will say I almost feel like this one has a little bit more purple to it, whereas maybe this one has a little bit more, I don't know, maybe a little bit more like brownie black, but Both are really bad swatches, so. Okay, after swatching, I feel like the only thing I will say in terms of like the biggest difference for me is I do feel like specifically in regards to the metallic shimmers in Natasha Denona, they're gonna be a little bit more punchy with the golden palette and have almost a little bit more of an opaque base, whereas this is not going to have as much of an opaque base. So depending on your preference, I still think that you're not going to be able to really tell much of a difference on the eyes. It's just, do you want to pay almost $50 more for that just little added punch of punchiness? Would I? Yes, I love Natasha Denona's golden palette, so I'm very, very biased, but I think that this is just as good. It's still going to give you an impact on the lids. It's still going to be sparkly. It's still going to be pretty, but that is the biggest difference that I noticed when I was swatching the two palettes. I also think maybe the Natasha Denona Golden has a little bit more yellow undertones, whereas I felt like this maybe red just slightly more like neutral or even like peachy pink, but that would be like me really nitpicking apart differences. I'm really quick going to just jump into quick swatches that I took of this entire palette as a whole so that you can see those before we jump into the look. Okay, don't judge my lips. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the lip combo today, but that's okay. We are gonna do a quick look with the Afterglow palette, and my inspiration for this look, I recently No Pan Left Behinded the golden palette, and I did a gold look with that palette that I really fell in love with. So my inspiration behind today's look is I think I'm going to use the majority of the bottom row of shadows here. I can't exactly remember the exact shades I used out of the golden palette, but I feel like I could get pretty close. And so then we can compare the two looks. So I'm just going to start out by taking a little bit of velvet in the crease. And the only thing I have on my eyes right now is the eyeshadow primer from Ulta Beauty, the Matte Veil Longwear eyeshadow primer. By the way, I feel like my bronzer looks really orange right now. I was gonna self-tan last night, but it is supposed to be in the 90s both Saturday and Sunday this weekend. So I'm actually hoping just to get maybe like a natural flush from the sun. Maybe we'll add some gradual self-tanner on top, but yeah, we're looking a little clowny today. That's okay. It's okay. Okay, that blended into the crease so easily. I did not notice any fallout, so things are looking good on that end. I am always really, really impressed with the quality of Alter Ego eyeshadow palettes. Next, I'm gonna take a little bit of Suede, which is, I believe, the Inspired By shade for Sandstone from the Golden palette, which is my favorite matte brown in the palette. I don't know, there's just something about the tone of this shadow that I love. And I'm gonna blend this into the crease and kind of focus it majority on just like the outer third of the lid. I'm also just gonna take a little bit of Sundrop, which is the shade right here, and I'm gonna use that to just blend out the edge a little bit. The one thing I will say about Sundrop is it is one of those like cream to powder shades, but it does seem to be working nicely to blend out the edge. All right, I feel like that all blended together so nicely. Okay, next I'm gonna take just a dot of cocoa and then more of sepia. I'm just gonna literally take a dot and then cocoa. And I'm gonna build out the outer part of my lid, just add a little bit of dimension. I did get a little bit of fallout there, so I'm gonna be better about tapping out those two. Okay, then dipping back into Suede and just using that to blend everything together. Okay, now I'm gonna take some of my NYX glitter glue like I do whenever I place any sort of shimmer down on my lids. And I'm gonna bring this one across my entire lid. Or I'm gonna bring this across my entire lid. All the way out into the outer corner. I'm gonna start out by taking Copper, which is the darkest of all of the shimmers. And I'm gonna plop that right onto the very outer part of the lid. Do I need to zoom you guys in? Should have zoomed you in a bit ago. That is so pretty on the lids. That's like so smooth. Wow, I'm so impressed by that shade. It's just like so smooth and looks so pretty on the lid. Next, I'm gonna take Blaze, which is the gold, and I'm gonna take that across my whole lid. I'm gonna start out by using a flat brush. And if I need to switch to my finger, I will. Okay, okay, just got a chunk of fallout, but that's probably my fault. Okay, that's what it looks like with a brush. I am just gonna use my finger and tap that on. I like to just use the finger typically with shimmer shades. I don't know, I just feel like they layer on better. Then I'm gonna take a little bit more of Copper and just kind of go over top where those two shadows meet. I'm a little bit worried about the fallout situation on this cheek. Oh, got it, we're good. I do feel like there's a little, like I feel like this needs to be blended out a little bit, so I'm just gonna jump into, I think I'm actually gonna take Velvet, and I have a clean brush here. I'm just gonna blend out that edge a little bit. Just gonna match what I did on this lid, so I'll start out with a brush, and then I'll go over top with my finger. Okay, I'm next gonna take a bit of Halo, which is this shade right here. Next, I'm gonna take a little bit of Halo, and I'm gonna pop Halo on top of the yellow. I feel like I remember thinking this was just like a little bit too yellow gold, and I wanted to see how shadows layered in the Natasha Denona Golden. And so it tones it down just a little bit. It makes it just a little bit more bronzy, which I really like. And then on a more concentrated brush on the very inner part of the lid, I'm gonna take a little bit of Ivory here and just place that on the very inner part of the lid. And then after I get to, oh, I already have my makeup on. I'm like, usually I do my makeup last, so I can just kind of go around the inner corner here, and I'm gonna bring this down onto the lower lash as well, just like that. I'm actually gonna take an even smaller brush, the lower lash. All right, I'm gonna take a brown liner on the upper lash line. By the way, my eye shape, like this eye is just like more closed off, and it just like, ugh, it literally like makes me feel rage in my soul. And I feel like today it's just like amplified. I don't know, maybe it's the way that I blended things together, but I see it, so you don't have to point it out to me. And then I'm also gonna just take a brown in the waterline. This is Ilia Dusk. And then just taking a mixture of of suede and velvet on the lower lash line to smudge out the lower lash. There's definitely some fallout here I am seeing. I'm also not loving at all the way that my base makeup looks today, but that's okay. And then just adding mascara. All right, you guys, this is the final look using the Alter Ego Amberglow eyeshadow palette. I love the way the look turned out. I had no issues with any of the shadows. Yes, there is some fallout with some, and I feel like inevitably always on the sides of my eyes, like this is not uncommon for my eyeshadow to look like that. I don't know if that's like just user error in my blending, but all right, you guys, and there we have it. This is my look using the Amberglow palette by Alter Ego. I will just quickly post on the screen the look that I created with the golden palette versus the look that I created with this palette. I will say I do think that the golden palette look is just a little bit punchier. I will say I also just liked my makeup better, I think, overall with the golden palette, so that could be playing into it. But I'm still so pleased with the way that this look turned out. I think if this is the color story that you want, like this is something I would travel with over Natasha Denona, just because this one obviously costs a little bit less. I am really impressed so far with the metallics that I've used in this, and I'm just so excited to have this in my collection. It never hurts to have, you know, I like this color story. It's kind of like when you find a shirt that you like, you'll just buy it in all the colors. Okay, actually that doesn't make sense because this is just the color story. What I'm trying to say is this is one of my favorite palettes in my collection, so I'm not mad to have, you know, a second one basically on backup. And I think that this is absolutely stunning. I think if you had your eye on the Natasha Denona Golden but don't want to pay $69 for a palette, I completely understand, and I think you will be just as happy with this palette. The quality is just so impressive with Alter Ego, and I love that you get magnetic pans too, so if you wanted to mix and match, if you have other Alter Ego palettes, you can do that. But that is going to wrap it up for today's video. That is my comparison of these two eyeshadow palettes. I'd love to know in the comments below if you want to see more comparison videos, and if there's anything else you'd like to see me add. Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel, as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.